is to take the change out of your pocket. Basically change is either good or bad. And when you just say change, if the change that you're talking about is raising taxes, if the change that you're talking about is pulling out of Iraq precipitously, if the change that you're talking about is socialized medicine, these are definitely changes, but they're changes in the wrong direction. So I think people have to focus a little bit more carefully on what is it we're promising and what are we trying to do. Now, if the change is in the direction of lower taxes, less spending, giving parents choice over education, energy independence, these are things that are going to make a brighter future and a better America. But just the word change doesn't connote good or bad. You've got to get one step beyond that and start looking at the changes. Now, on my foreign policy experience, which is what you asked me about, I've had foreign policy experience going back to 1970s when I served on a committee in the Ford administration on terrorism. I negotiated agreements with governments over illegal immigration. I negotiated agreements with governments over prisoners. When I had to make decisions about foreign policy, I made decisions. I threw Arafat out of the UN 50 celebration, and I made sure Castro wouldn't come to that celebration. And when I was confronted by an Arab prince who wanted to give us $10 million for the Twin Towers Fund, I said, no, we're not going to take it, because he wanted us to question American foreign policy, in particular our relationship with Israel. As mayor of New York, I was involved in foreign policy issues all the time. And the difference between being an executive and being a legislator is you're not just one of 100. You have to actually make decisions, and there are consequences to your decisions. And many of them were in this area of either foreign policy or related to it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Senator McCain, does that satisfy your concerns earlier mentioned?
Look, I have the greatest respect and affection for the mayor of New York. My point is that I've been involved in every major national security challenge for the last 20 years. And before that, I fought in some of them. The fact is that I have led the largest squadron in the United States Navy, not for profit, but for patriotism. And I believe that my experience and background has given me the judgment to make the decisions that are necessary in this transcendent challenge of radical Islamic extremism. I have great respect for everyone on the stage. It's a tough business we're in, and I appreciate them. I just believe that I am more qualified.
Governor Huckabee, to change the subject a little bit and focus a moment on electability. Back in 1998, you were one of about 100 people who affirmed in a full-page ad in the New York Times the Southern Baptist Convention's declaration that, quote, a wife is to submit herself graciously to the servant leadership of her husband. Women voters in both parties harshly criticized that. Is that position politically viable in the general election of 2008, sir?
You know, it's interesting. Everybody says religion is off limits, except we always can ask me the religious questions. So let me try to do my best to answer it. And since if we're really going to have a religious service, I'd really feel more comfortable if I could pass the plates, because our campaign could use the money tonight, Carl. We'll just go all the way. First of all, if anybody knows my wife, I don't think they for 1 minute think that she's going to just sit by and let me do whatever I want to. That would be an absolute, total misunderstanding of Janet Huckabee. The whole context of that passage, and by the way, it really was spoken to believers, to Christian believers. I'm not the least bit ashamed of my faith or the doctrines of it. I don't try to impose that as a governor, and I wouldn't impose it as a president. But I certainly am going to practice it unashamedly, whether I'm a president or whether I'm not a president. But the point, and it comes from a passage of Scripture in the New Testament book of Ephesians, is that as wives submit themselves to the husbands also submit themselves. And it's not a matter of one being somehow superior over the other. It's both mutually showing their affection and submission as unto the Lord. So with all due respect, it has nothing to do with presidency. I just wanted to clear up that little doctrinal quirk there so that there's nobody who misunderstands that it's really about doing what a marriage ought to do. And that's, marriage is not a 50-50 deal where each partner gives 50%. Biblically, marriage is a 100-100 deal. Each partner gives 100% of their devotion to the other. And that's why marriage is an important institution, because it teaches us how to love.
Congressman Paul, yet another question about electability. Do you have any, sir? There's always the question as to whether or not you are in fact viable. Your differences with the Republicans with the rest of the Republicans on this stage has raised questions about whether or not you can actually win the Republican nomination, sir.
Well, we've only had 2 little primaries so far, so it's pretty premature to decide which one is going to be the candidate. But, you know, when you think about it, if you measured everything I've ever said, every vote I've ever taken against the Constitution, you know, I'm a strict constitutionalist. Are you suggesting the Republicans should write me off because I'm a strict constitutionalist? I'm the most conservative member here. I have voted, you know, against more spending and wasting government than anybody else. So you're suggesting that I'm not electable and the Republicans don't want me because I'm a strict fiscal conservative? Because I believe in civil liberties? Why should we not be defending civil liberties? And why should we not be talking about foreign policy that used to be the part of the Republican Party? Mr. Republican Robert Taft didn't even want us to be in NATO. And you're saying now that we have to continue to borrow money from China to finance this empire that we can't afford? Let me see if I get this right. We need to borrow $10 billion from China, and then we give it to Musharraf, who's a military dictator who overthrew an elected government, and then we go to war, we lose all these lives promoting democracy in Iraq. I mean, what's going on here? And you're saying that this isn't appealing to Republicans? Where did this come about? I think this is a Republican message. I defend the platform. It used to say we got rid of the Department of Education. It doesn't say that. Now, we as Republicans went and doubled the size of the Department of Education. So where have we gone? I think we've lost our way. And then the insinuation that I am less Republican because of that?
Congressman, thank you very much. We have to take one more break. We'll be right back with one of the most contentious issues of the day. Stay tuned. Back for a final segment of questions. Gentlemen, because we've had a lot of rebuttal time tonight, we're going to ask you, if you can, so we can get this in the allotted time, to have answers of 1 minute followed by 30-second rebuttals if necessary. Wendell, you have the question.
And I'd like to focus on immigration, which polls indicate is a big issue here in South Carolina, as it was in New Hampshire. Senator McCain, the president's push for immigration reform failed mainly because of disagreements over your plan for dealing with the 12 million people now here illegally. You say you've learned your lesson, you'd secure the borders first, okay? Then how would you deal with the illegals?
Actually, it failed because the American people had no trust or confidence in the federal government to do its job. Because we had passed a law in 1986 that said we'd allow citizenship, and actually what happened was that we didn't secure the borders as we promised. So Americans need to restore their trust and confidence. I know how to secure the borders. I come from a border state where our borders are broken. More people come across our border illegally every year than most any other state. And I will secure the borders first, and I will have the border states' governors certify that those borders are secured. And we can do it with UAVs, with vehicle barriers, with walls, and with high tech and cameras. The remaining 12 million, obviously 2 million of them who have committed crimes have to be rounded up and deported immediately. They cannot stay in our society. And we must then, in my view, address it in as humane and compassionate way as possible. The 3 GIs were missing last year in action. One of them was still missing in action. His wife was about to be deported from this country. I'm not going to deport the wife of a fighting serviceman who's missing in action. I'm going to handle it in a humane and compassionate fashion, and we will reward no one. They will have to get at the end of the line, pay a fine, learn English, and we will secure the borders first, and I know how to do that.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Romney.